I just wanted to talk to you about some of the challenges in the security industry as a whole, and some of the trends I've seen working with a lot of different security vendors. Generally things like Tanium, FireEye, FireEye, MX, and all these other things. I've had a lot of experience testing those products, and one thing that I've noticed, being from the adversarial perspective, is there's kind of two primary points of failure I've noticed in a lot of security products. One, it's collecting telemetry. In other words, getting the actual data. And then the other part is being able to actually do something with that data. And actually the third thing is presenting it in a usable way. So actually it's three things. So getting the data, analyzing and getting some sort of analytical output, and then presenting it for someone to actually respond to. And then you can even argue more like response, what do you do? But that's a whole process thing. But in the telemetry collection game, where I notice a lot of tools fail is down the route of specifically where adversaries can actually easily defeat their telemetry gathering capabilities. For instance, certain tools have a buffer in their actual aggregation of all the logs that have occurred on the box. So as an adversary, I can literally just push those things out of the log by writing a script that writes 50,000 times up to 50,000. And it literally pushes them all out. That's one example. Or you can obfuscate code. So most endpoint products or even intrusion detection systems are signature based. So you can easily defeat those with just obfuscation. There's a lot of great tools out there for it. So there's a lot of challenges on the endpoint, okay? Or at the network level. It's actually the same challenge. And then you have the analytics piece. How do you, it's an issue of scale from there. So how do you solve either from the endpoint perspective or the enterprise strategic perspective of analyzing this massive data and then coming up with something usable from it. And I find a lot of security products don't consider a holistic solution, and that's a very hard thing to answer, admittedly. It takes a lot of interconnectivity and things talking to each other to do that. But that's where I've seen the most success, when people are able to actually do that, because once you're compromised and someone's in your network, it's hard to initially identify them. And it's also hard to basically go beyond that and say, are they still in there after you kicked only one person out? So how do you verify that? Those are the questions you have to ask yourself. And then ultimately presenting that data. And should we go on?
Sure.
You can keep going, I'll listen.
Oh, so and ultimately presenting that data to someone so it's usable, because most dashboards are just terrible to go through. They're kind of unintuitive. They're hard to use. A lot of the incident responders I worked with in the past, would have to go through up to 10 different dashboards to actually trace an incident, and that's just that's unworkable. The adversary's already gotten what they needed by that time, even if you know where they are. So it's much harder to respond at that point. So the goal to any security product is give the responders the best capability they can to actually be successful. So, I mean, that's a very high level perspective of it, but there's a lot of challenges in those three buckets that I think as a whole, they are very difficult to solve. I empathize with security vendors, but we're not actually putting the UX design, the data analytics, the consideration of how do we analyze that data, as much as the actual engineering of the software itself. Does that make sense? We have a great way to collect data and do these cool things, but we're not thinking about the adversarial side, the purpose of why we're here. And we're not putting as much thought as we should into that arena.
So is the idea that we've got an advantage as GitLab because we've got the single application, we've got the monitoring side in Prometheus wired up already. We can give people a single pane of glass, so to speak, for they're in there anyway, and now they can just switch over and see their security information and it's actionable.
Yeah, and that's ultimately what I hope. That's actually why I joined. I've been on the service side of the house for years, and I wanted to get in the product side because I got tired of constantly seeing the same problems repeated over and over again. And I love GitLab's motto or their way of thinking, one application to solve a lot of different problems. And I consider it for software. We're solving problems for software, not developers. Now we're just solving software and for people. That's just my own personal side of it. I know that's not what we say, but it's a holistic solution, in other words. And if we can start from the beginning where we start to develop code and then also implement that directly into the code, like security and defensiveness into the code, we're already ahead of the game because we're able to collect telemetry. And that's actually the biggest challenge, actually, collecting telemetry. I can't tell you how hard it is for an implemented system across an entire enterprise with hundreds of thousands of systems to get actually endpoints out on each of those systems and coordinate that. But if you can do it from the get-go, from GitLab, and just deploy it, and then iterate, you can build something, even if it's not perfect at first, you can quickly iterate to build something really powerful and start building upon blocks and blocks and blocks. And that's from the security perspective. And that's what I believe, and that's what I'm really curious about here at GitLab, if that's gonna be successful, because I guess a holistic solution, I feel, is the best way forward if we're gonna solve software problems.
Yeah. I think Istio is something we have to start taking very seriously. There's a huge push going on right downstairs by Google about Istio, and that's the service mesh, and that's got a lot of security angles to it. And we've been talking a little bit around it, but I think that could be the next Kubernetes-like project, and it's all about getting that information back. And the idea is the agent's already installed in these machines anyway, and then it's a matter of gathering the data and turning it into something that you can do with it.
I completely agree with that, because the biggest issue for cloud is collecting telemetry, and you have all these browsers, these endpoints, these users, for instance, and then you also have all these applications, and there's no collection or aggregation of data. So how do you solve that challenge, for instance, like with Office 365 or any corporate or enterprise grade tool or software, these commodity softwares? How do you collect data and analyze it? One answer is CASBs. Let's run our stuff through a cloud access security broker. And that's a good solution, but I think the best solution is to get the telemetry from the authoritative source, which everything that's going to be processing everyone's requests, which is the server, which is going to basically start from. And not a lot of people do that right now. I haven't seen a huge shift where people are analyzing things except with web application firewalls, but there's a lot of limitations to those. They're great though. But yeah, there's that is a giant problem, and it's interesting Google's trying to solve that in that way.
Cool.
Cool. Thanks.
Thank you.